Calaroga Shark Media.
Hey there, I'm Johnny Mac, and we're continuing to follow the death of Rob Reiner. I will continue to do these as standalone episodes and focus it through the lens of stand-up comedy. Jerry Seinfeld called Rob Reiner the biggest influence on my career. Seinfeld explained the show Seinfeld would never have happened without Rob Reiner. He saw something no one else could. When nobody at the network liked the early episodes, he saved us from cancellation. That I was working with Carl Reiner's son, who happened to be one of the kindest people in show business, seemed unreal. I was naive at the time to how much his passion for us meant. Seinfeld praised Rob's marriage to Michelle Singer, calling it an imprint for me of how it's supposed to work, each one broadening the other. Their death together is impossibly sad. Rob Reiner was on the Howard Stern Show in 2016 and explained how Castle Rock recognized the potential of the Seinfeld series. Rob defended it to NBC as Rob told the story to Howard. NBC said, "We can't have this show. What is this show? It's just people sitting around talking." As Rob told it, I said, "Please, I promise you there'll be stories. You can't take the show off the air. It's going to be one of the great shows you've ever had." I mentioned at the end of yesterday's bonus episode that the President of the United States just made some terrible, horrible comments. I'm not going to pull any punches here. Just awful. Jimmy Kimmel spoke about those comments at length. I'm going to play a very long clip here from Jimmy Kimmel, but I don't think it could be said better.
Here in Los Angeles, the murder of one of our greatest directors and patriots, Rob Reiner, and his wife, Michelle Reiner. And what we need in a time like this, besides common sense when it comes to guns and mental health care, is compassion and leadership. We did not get that from our president because he has none of it to give. Instead, we got a fool rambling about nonsense. We got a brief moment of respect for our friends in Australia. We got a brief moment of condolence followed by a things happen for the students at Brown. And for Rob and Michelle Reiner, we got this post. A very sad thing happened last night in Hollywood. Rob Reiner, a tortured and struggling but once very talented movie director and comedy star, has passed away, together with his wife, Michelle, reportedly due to the anger he caused others through his massive, unyielding, and incurable affliction with a mind-crippling disease known as Trump derangement syndrome, sometimes referred to as TDS. He was known to have driven people crazy by his raging obsession of President Donald J. Trump, with his obvious paranoia reaching new heights as the Trump administration surpassed all goals and expectations of greatness, and with the golden age of America upon us, perhaps like never before. May Rob and Michelle rest in peace. Just when you think he can't go any lower, he somehow finds a way to do that. His description of what happened, of course, is not at all what happened. And this is exactly what I've spoken about before, this rush to pin the tail on the donkey in pursuit of the Trump-friendly narrative, not to mention blaming his death on the fact that he is an outspoken liberal, insulting someone who's just been murdered, who leaves children behind, without having any idea of what actually happened. It's so hateful and vile. When I first saw it, I thought it was fake. My wife showed it to me this morning. I was like, well, even for him, that seemed like too much, but nothing is ever too much for him. Of course, you won't see the Fox News gang screaming about this one, but a couple of Republicans did, to their credit, two of them, I think. And so a few hours later, a White House reporter gave Trump the chance to take another shot to act like a human being.
A number of Republicans have denounced your statement on Truth Social after the murder of Rob Reiner. Do you stand by that post?
Well, I wasn't a fan of his at all. He was a deranged person as far as Trump is concerned. He said he knew it was false. In fact, it's the exact opposite, that I was a friend of Russia, controlled by Russia. You know, it was the Russia hoax. He was one of the people behind it. I think he hurt himself in career-wise. He became like a deranged person, Trump derangement syndrome. So I was not a fan of Rob Reiner at all, in any way, shape, or form. I thought he was very bad for our country. Yeah.
That corroded brain is in charge of our lives. If you voted for that, it's okay to reconsider. It's perfectly fine. And I have to say, I know from my personal interactions with Rob Reiner that he would want us to keep pointing out the loathsome atrocities that continue to ooze out of this sick and irresponsible man's mouths. And so we're going to do that over and over again until the rest of us wake up.
On that episode, guest Michelle Obama. This is really interesting. Listen to this. Michelle said, "We've known them for years, many years, and we were supposed to be seeing them that night. Wow. I don't want to speculate. I don't know where the meeting would have taken place, but boy, very easy to let your mind run wild with that one. Stephen Colbert did a cold open.
Hi, everybody. Normally, we start the show with a short cold open about a major news story of the day, but after the terrible news this past weekend, the horrifying Hanukkah massacre at Bondi Beach, the tragic shootings at Brown University, and the heartbreaking deaths of Rob and Michelle Reiner, all the major stories are too dark for that. Other people's tragedy is sacred ground, and we try very hard not to walk there. But we are going to do a comedy show tonight in light of and in spite of the darkness.
Seth Meyers got very serious. He did 7 minutes about the Reiners, but I'll play just a chunk here for you.
We all got the news that Rob and Michelle Reiner had been murdered in their homes. I did not know Rob and Michelle very well, but I've been lucky enough to spend time with them, and they were delightful people to be in a room with. I had Rob here on this show for the first time a couple months ago, and I could have talked to him for hours about his work, about his career. A few years ago, I was lucky enough to get invited to a 100th birthday party for Norman Lear. Norman Lear was an incredible creator of television. He was the mind and the heart behind some of the greatest shows ever made. One of them was All in the Family. Rob had been in that show. Rob was also at that 100th birthday party. And Norman was 100 years old, and he was still very with it. I was sitting next to him, and he could hold a conversation. He was incredible to behold. And at the end of the night, there were about 40 or 50 people there. The host of the party said, does anybody here have anything to ask Norman? And somebody said, Norman, how did your career start? How did you know you wanted to do what you did? And, you know, he was a sharp 100-year-old man, but he was still a 100-year-old man. He was sort of struggling to come up with a way to answer that question. And we were all patiently waiting. And then Rob just yelled out from the back of the room. He said, Norman, tell them the story about how you once hid in a birthday present. And then Norman launched into this story that he clearly told 100 times, if not more. And it was just the most wonderful story. And everyone was delighted in it. And as soon as one story ended, Rob, who'd known Norman for so long, would just yell out another greatest hit story. And Norman would tell another incredible tale. And I know this sounds like a story about Norman, but it's also a really great story about Rob, because Rob was known. Rob had this reputation for getting the best out of people. And if you watch his films, you know that is something he had the skill with. But to see him in person and know that's what it was like in his real life as well, it was just so truly special to see.
Late Nighter reported that Jimmy Fallon did regular monologue jokes about Trump, but stayed away from the Reiner story entirely. Late Nighter says that Jimmy addressed it in a straightforward post-monologue expression of sadness, without any mention of Trump's accompanying comments. Johnny Mac will add the opinion that is a poor decision by Jimmy Fallon. Jim Norton tweeted, just a heads up, it's okay to be sad about Rob Reiner's death without letting everyone know that you didn't agree with the politics. No one gives a hoot. Continuing to focus this story through a stand-up comedy lens and not getting into the gory details of it, but Conan O'Brien's name making the story. Rob Reiner and son Nick Reiner were involved in a heated argument on Saturday night at Conan O'Brien's Christmas party. Sources told People Nick was, quote, freaking everyone out, acting crazy, kept asking people if they were famous. TMZ reported that after the argument, Rob and Michelle left the party. It is unclear if Nick left the party at that time. At the National Comedy Center in Jamestown, New York, Executive Director Journey Gunderson says Rob Reiner visited in 2020 with his family to cut the ribbon on the Carl Reiner Keep Laughing exhibit. Journey said his visit was incredible because it wasn't a moment about him, even though his career certainly stands on its own, both within comedy and outside of it. It was about honoring his father's legacy, and he had reverence and humility and this kind of steadfast intellect about anything comedic or when it came to the humanity of the art that his father had created. She recalls in 2021, Rob Reiner appeared on the Today Show to announce the Comedy Center's acquisition of Carl Reiner's archive. Journey said, my first meeting with Rob was to brief him on what he would then later find in Jamestown and our work at the National Comedy Center. And he really went to bat for us as a cultural institution because he believed in the mission and he believed in the cause. Gunderson said, not a day goes by at the center where someone isn't laughing about Rob's own contributions, including This Is Spinal Tap. She says it was a film that was largely improvised and collaborative, which is kind of rare. So many things are really scripted to a T, so in 1984, he comes out with his directorial debut of This Is Spinal Tap. Over the more than 10 years since we started building the National Comedy Center, people come up to me all the time with their favorites or their quote of all time, and it's many times that people tell me the original Spinal Tap is their favorite comedy. Gunnarsson says it feels like they've lost a leader of the entertainment community. Someone online said it best. They said, "We've lost one of the few good men," and I thought that was well said. There was a regular episode in the feed earlier today, back in the morning with a normal episode.